Though you all appreciate, tank design is a very complicated subject. It involves a big raft of considerations. I mean, to start with, there's the tank triangle. Armour protection, firepower, mobility. You've got to get those in balance, depending on what you want the tank to do. Then there's the available technology and the logistics. But finally, and this is a lot more important than a lot of people realise, there's the socio-political aspect, the society that produces the tank. And to my mind, there is no tank that embodies this characteristic quite so well as this one, the World War II Soviet T-34. This video has been made possible by our supporters on Patreon, our YouTube members and our Super Thanks donors. Please join them if you can and support Tank Museum. And thanks for watching. The T-34 is legendary. It's often called the tank that won World War II, and with good reason. It was available in vast numbers, and it was the instrument of deep battle. And that's the waging of war on an unprecedented scale and with unparalleled ferocity that was responsible for the destruction of Nazi Germany. At the same time, it's a design that in many ways is crude in the extreme, and even by tank standards, pretty horrible to crew. My colleague David Willey dealt with the history and development of the T-34 in Tank Chat number 68. So what I want to do now is have a look at some different aspects of the vehicle, inside and out, and also what made it a war-winning weapon. T-34 design comes out of experience in the Spanish Civil War, and that's reinforced by fighting the Japanese in Mongolia in 1939. Now, existing Soviet tanks, the BT range and the T-26, were really found wanting. They were petrol engines, lightly armed and armoured, and they were vulnerable to the fire of anti-tank guns and rifles. So, the call goes out for a tank that is, quote, shell-proof and diesel-engined, and therefore it's less likely to catch fire when it's hit. After the usual politicking between factories and government departments, a design team, Bureau 24, was established. By Mikhail Ilyich Koshkin at Zavod number 183 at Kharkov. Koshkin's baby, after numerous changes in specification and developmental phases, was this tank, the T-34-76. Before we go any further, I think there's one thing I need to explain. Now, a lot of people look at this tank and say, well, you know, it's Soviet, early World War II. Why has it got Nazi insignia? Now, there's a good reason for this. This is on loan to us from the Finnish Army Museum. T-34-76 is they're quite scarce, quite difficult to come by. It was captured during what they call the Continuation War of 1941 to 44. And the Finnish insignia at the time was a swastika, a Hakenkreuz. But unlike the Nazi version, it's got short arms. Ignoring that and just looking at the tank for a moment, you'll see this is very much a no-frills, stripped down, entirely practical design. Now, the finish is frankly quite rough. You cannot imagine a horrible well like that passing muster at Henschel or Man. But the thing is, it's good where it needs to be, as you'll see. Beginning with the basics, the T-34 has sloped armour. And now, it's a popular misconception the T-34 was the first to utilise this. It wasn't. But the advantages are, first of all, that sloped armour increases the likelihood that an incoming round will ricochet rather than penetrating. But, and this is the most significant thing, it also increases the thickness of metal that a round has to get through. The T-34 has 45mm of frontal armour, but if this is inclined at 60 degrees, that gives 90mm of protection against a round flying horizontally. I can't imagine that putting the driver's hatch here, right in the middle of the glacis, is a terribly good idea. It's an inbuilt weak spot, but there doesn't seem to be anywhere else logically to put it. Now, the other thing you see are a large number of grab handles. and these are for tankowi desantniki, tank riders, the infantry who actually rode on the tanks into battle. The tank has 5 pairs of road wheels each side, and then here at the back is the sprocket wheel, and at the front is the idler. You'll see there are no return rollers because it operates on the usual Soviet slack track principle, so it's just the weight of the track keeping it in place. There are nice large gaps between the road wheels too. The Red Army knew that winter in Russia meant lots of frozen mud, and these are easy to clear out. The German system of overlapping road wheels was an absolute nightmare. The T-34 has Christie suspension, and that's best simply explained as big wheels and big springs. J. Walter Christie was a former racing driver, and he's got speed permanently on his mind, and that's what this type of suspension is designed for. The T-34 wasn't the first Soviet tank to use the Christie system. The BT range had it too, and they coupled this with a wheel and track system where the road wheels were powered too and steered conventionally, meaning the tank could move without its tracks. This was really quite useful in terms of travelling long distances by road, but it was also complicated. So, like everything else about the T-34, it was sacrificed for ease of production and maintenance. Moving on to tracks, there's one piece of Soviet simplicity that has become legendary: the track pin. I think it's probably most easily explained if you follow me over here and we take a look at this German Panther. Now, as any tank man will tell you, the problem with tracks, track links, track pins, is they wear. There's lots of abrasive dust around, and the holes especially that the track pins go through enlarge. They become oval. And the track pins get loose, and potentially they can come out, and obviously that's going to be disastrous because you will lose track. So, what do you do about it? Well, if you're a German with a highly technical approach to everything, you put a circlip around the end of the track pin, and then you put a rivet through the circlip to make sure that it doesn't come off. So what about T-34? On the end of the track pin, nothing. So the track pin will start to come out. In fact, this one's starting to work its way out already. The thing is, as it protrudes, it will hit a flange just here under the mudguard, and that will knock it back in. Now, it's a bit crude, it's very simple, but it is extremely effective. The wide-spaced road wheel and track arrangement meant the T-34 coped extremely well in muddy and snowy conditions, and actually gave it superior mobility to an awful lot of the German tanks it encountered. Coming round to the back of the tank, you can see another really practical aspect of this design. Now, tank crews have to be able to do the majority of their own maintenance in the field. So, to help them, the whole back of the tank, this big plate here, is hinged. So if you drop that one down, lift the decks, there's the transmission and the engine, all nicely accessible. We now come to the engine. Now, the Kharkov V2 is a superb engine. It's probably one of the best tank engines ever built. It is a V12, 500 brake horsepower, double overhead cam, and these are features that you find in modern high-performance diesel engines. The problem with diesel engines is that they are inclined to be quite bulky and heavy, but they've cut the weight down by using an aluminium block, so the power to weight ratio is excellent. Versions of this engine are still in use in vehicles today. Not that any of that did the designer, Konstantin Chelpin, much good. He was awarded the Order of Lenin, but then in 1938 he was condemned, purged, tortured into signing a confession, and shot by the NKVD. As I mentioned earlier, this is a T-34-76, and that's the version that's produced from 1940 up to 1944. We'll look at the later version, the T-34-85, in due course. But this version has a two-man turret. There's one large turret hatch, and then the PT-47 periscopic sight. Now, we would take a look inside this tank, but it has spent a great many years outside, so there's a very high degree of corrosion. But we do have a very good example of an F-34 gun in our Vehicle Conservation Centre. It's a bit of a sad story, this. This gun was fitted to a T-34-76, which was sent over in 1943 for evaluation, but when that had been done, it was scrapped. It's been mounted and sectioned for instructional purposes. So you can see it's been cut away, mantlet's been cut away here to show the recoil mechanism. You have got the elevation controls, the fitting for the gunner's telescopic side, and then over on the far side, the mounts for the Degtyarev coaxial machine gun. The T-34-76 was well armed for its day, and it did prove a nasty surprise for the German armour encountered during Barbarossa. It was, however, very much in the minority. 80% plus of Soviet armour in 1941 were older types, such as the BT range and the T-26. This would change, but first of all, it would require a massive feat of industrial relocation. Around about 1,300 factories were shifted 1,000 kilometres east over to the Ural region. And an entire new city, Chelyabinsk, known as Tankograd, was created. The centre of tank production was moved from Kharkiv over to Nizhny Tagil in the Ural Mountains. Post-war, with Kharkov re-established, the two plants would become rivals in the development of tanks like the T-64 and the T-72. If we now move on to the T-34-85, you'll see it's an improvement on the earlier vehicle in quite a number of ways. The redesigned turret is large enough to accommodate a loader, as well as the gunner and commander, making the operation of the gun and the rate of fire a lot more efficient. This T-34 was built in Zavod 112 in Gorky in late 1944, but it was actually captured in 1950 during the Korean War. These had been supplied to the North Korean Army. The upgunning from 76.2mm to 85mm happened in 1944, and it was a result of encounters with heavier German armour on the Eastern Front. There was a reluctance to do this because of the disruption to tank production, but eventually it couldn't be postponed any longer. The 76.2mm F-34 gun, as fitted to the T-34-76, fired around with a muzzle velocity of 662 metres a second. Now that's good for the battlefield of 1941, because it can penetrate up to 63mm of sloped armour and up to 1,000 metres. But it wasn't effective against the frontal armour of either Tiger I or Panther. The new 85mm ZIS S-53 gun had a muzzle velocity of 792 metres a second, and that could penetrate 102mm of armour at up to 1,000 metres. Now the standard ammunition load for the tank is 55 rounds, and that's 36 either HE or fragmentation, 5 high velocity armour piercing, and 14 basic armour piercing. The HVAP round was a composite the tungsten carbide core, which seems to have been based on the German Arrowhead round of 1942, though it's got a smaller tungsten penetrator. We're now going to go inside the tank, and starting with the turret, you can see the breech of the ZIS S-53 and the really quite large steel recoil shield. Now the new turret's quite a bit bigger to take the new gun, but it is still really quite cramped. Gunner's position is to the left of the gun, and his TSHU-16 monocular sight is missing, as is his periscope, and these are the usual things that tend to get stripped out quite quick. To the right of the gun is the mount for the coaxial engine. Here you see the gunner's controls with the turret traverse and elevation, and then down by his right hand is the firing lanyard. Down here is the driver's position, and it was apparently pretty uncomfortable. And his controls, the steering levers, and then his foot pedals, clutch, throttle and brakes. In this clip, workshop volunteer Chris Fielder shows what a slog driving the T-34 was. The driver's hatch is his main entry and exit to the fighting compartment, and it's got two locks and a counterweight to aid opening because it is massively heavy. At the top there are two vision locks with armoured shutters, and these replace the earlier periscope arrangement. On the driver's left is the main electrical distribution panel, and then going right, the ball mount for the Degtyarev 7.62 machine gun. This has drum magazines, and you can see the stowage rack just by the side. The wireless set, which is now missing, will be on the driver's right. In the early part of the war, T-34s only had radio for company commanders, but by late 1944, around 80% were wireless equipped. Now its efficiency was frankly quite variable. Here you can see the spring-loaded seats for a tank commander and a gunner. There is no turret basket, so these are attached to the turret ring. Now looking down at the bottom of the tank, it seems deceptively roomy, but in fact this was ammunition stowage. Wooden boxes covered with rubber mats, with the rounds stacked 3 deep, and that's half the height of a road wheel.